I was watching my last upload and shaking my head. Who was that uber chipper woman? What could possibly make a normally low energy gal so extra? Well, the answer is happy male, of course. Duh. The point is, I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. So, for anyone who's just discovered Inkworks through that video, we usually aren't that ebullient here. Hi, I'm Irene, the laggardly, and this is Inkworks, where I art an anecdote. So, this art project was me expressing my joy in the winter season. It's around mid-December now, and I'm enjoying the festive feels. Mental images of holly leaves and poinsettias have filled my head. So I'm going to talk a little about the tools and the process. Then I'll switch tack to chat about some non-art stuff. Just giving a heads up so you aren't blindsided later. The concept sketch was loosely done with Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencils. When it came time to resketch it onto watercolor paper, I used a Derwent drawing pencil. That was then lined with a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen, the one with the soft brush tip. No, I'm not a Faber-Castell brand ambassador. I just happen to like those products. I'll say it right now. I prefer the concept sketch over the finished painting, and that's okay. It doesn't diminish the fun I had during the painting process. Look, self-criticism isn't necessarily a bad thing. At the very least, it should lead to better understanding of oneself, but even more, it should lead to self-improvement. When self-criticism makes you give up on something you enjoy doing, that's when I see it as a destructive thing. Just some thoughts. I have more, but all of that took a lot out of me. Like I said, laggardly. Cold-pressed watercolor paper isn't ideal for these Pitt pens. The texture prevents a smooth, clean line, but the purpose here was simply to add boldness to the drawing. I usually like to use hot-pressed watercolor paper for line and wash techniques, but I am currently out of stock. This ink work could have been done last, after painting, but I needed help seeing the sketch. You might be thinking, but Irene, why didn't you just press harder with the pencil? Because, as great as the Derwent drawing pencils are for coloring, their softness means they aren't great for fine details. That's my opinion anyway. I welcome opposing views in the comments, and not just because it helps with the channel's engagement factor. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Help us get to 10,000 subs, guys. It may have been confusing when I said we earlier. It was in reference to myself and producer Mike, because my partner contributes to this channel technically by managing the camera and lights, creatively by suggesting content ideas, and motivationally by springing for supplies and uttering an occasional "good job." He knows how important that last part is, because when I don't get enough praise, it's like one of those Snickers "you're not you when you're hungry" commercials. Except instead of Betty White, it's Hela, the goddess of death, with fully sprung antlers. In recent videos, I've mentioned an injury, specifically a broken arm from 4 months ago, but haven't shared many details about the recovery process. And that's because the first couple of months had some of the worst days of my life. The first month was spent in a splint, dosed up on some pretty strong pain meds, waiting for my surgery date, which involved attaching a metal plate with screws. The second month was spent in a new splint, dosed up on some pretty strong pain meds, waiting to start a series of occupational therapy sessions. It was a struggle trying to find the right dosage where the pain was managed enough without constantly dozing off. There were other meds, such as anti-nausea and laxative pills to counteract the pain meds, because apparently, and this is news to me, narcotics cause constipation. All this in addition to being functionally incapacitated. Who knew that a broken arm would affect one's balance, cause shoulder problems, and make basic tasks either impossible or take 10 times longer while working up a sweat? Yeah, I had some bad days. For example, that time I was crying in the bathroom because I couldn't pull my pants back up. Or all those times Producer Mike shoved my hair into a band and I had to go around with chunks sticking out at odd angles. Yeah, I cried over that too. But once therapy started, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel because I could finally see improvement. Was it slow? Yes. So slow that on a few occasions I fell into despair. But week after week, I gained more mobility and strength in my left hand and wrist. I've now had 2 months of therapy, and when I think back to the first session, the difference is huge. I can do so many more things now. No, I'm not back to my old self. I'm still somewhat limited, and I have to continue to work on that, likely for months to come. But I can now cook, clean, shower, dress, and put up my hair again. For those who are curious about the difference between the terms physical therapy and occupational therapy, from what I gather, physical therapy focuses on general movement and mobility, whereas occupational therapy is more about the upper body, fine motor skills, and the ability to perform tasks. I had 2 one-hour sessions a week where my therapist helped me through a number of techniques, such as heat application, massage, and stretching. Also, various manual exercises involving moving, squeezing, placing, and manipulating objects. So, although I'm not there yet, through these exercises, my therapist has given me the tools to continue progression on my own, and I'm feeling more optimistic now. A little about braces. On my first therapy visit, they cut off my post-suture removal splint, cleaned the incision line, then fitted me with a moldable thermoplastic brace. It was pretty cool, lightweight and removable too. I wore that for the first few weeks along with a compression sleeve. During that time, I was weaning myself off the stronger pain meds and replacing them with over-the-counter acetaminophen and ibuprofen instead, which meant I didn't have to take the anti-nausea and laxative pills anymore. Yay! So I thought I was done with braces, but since my progress was slow, I applied for and was approved to be fitted with I'm sure there's a proper term for it, but I call it the rack. It's a brace with a lot of metal, Velcro straps, and adjustable knobs. For the past few weeks, I've been wearing it an hour at a time, several times a day, to incrementally flex my wrist. It's an impressive piece of equipment. It's also a bit heavy, so I place a pillow between it and my lap and stoically endure while watching travel tube videos about European Christmas markets. All the while wishing I had a mug of hot and spicy Glühwein mit Schuss. A couple of points regarding my rate of recovery. I expect my age is a factor. At 56, I can't expect to heal as quickly as if I were 26. I get that. And this is something I hadn't thought about, but early on, my therapist put it this way. I was experiencing a series of traumas. First, the trauma of breaking my arm and having emergency treatment. Next, the trauma of surgery and post-surgery recovery. Then, the trauma of therapy, which is often quite uncomfortable and painful. And yes, I have cried during a session or two. But when she described it that way, my first thought, which I kept to myself, was, okay, hold on, let's not go overboard. Because the whole time, ever since the initial break, I'd been telling myself, this is no big deal. People go through things like this all the time. Even in the emergency room, I was cracking jokes while the young physician, who was as white as a sheet, shakily said, okay, these two guys are gonna hold you still while I pull your bones back into place. But I thought it over, and suddenly all of those negative feelings and bouts of crying and days spent in depression all made sense. And I realized, OMG, she's right. It is a big freaking deal. You know, I liked using that flat brush. It's a flat type, yes, but with an angled edge. And it's called an angled shader. It laid down the paint really well. All of the Aqua Elite brushes from Princeton are good that way. Excellent release, I think that's the term. And I've just realized I never told you what the paint colors are. Perylene Green, Gold Ochre, Raw Umber, and Payne's Gray from Da Vinci, and Permanent Alizarin Crimson from M. Graham. The paper is from the Hanamulla collection. It's 140-pound weight and 100% cotton. I guess I hadn't thought things through, or else I just forgot how vibrant these paints are, because I feel like the saturation is a bit too much. Which is funny, because at first I considered using the more muted Art Nouveau set from Kuretake, but then thought, nah, this will be fine. And it probably would have been fine if I'd bothered to fill in the negative space. That way the contrast would be less stark. I confess that a part of me was thinking, no, don't talk about the injury again, because I didn't want it to be a woe is me thing. But then this video turned out to be a whopping 20 minutes long, so here we are. Plus, maybe someone is curious about the whole therapy thing. It was new to me. I was actually kind of hesitant to begin the sessions, which is why I dragged my feet before committing to it. I don't know. I sort of imagined a wide-open gymnasium filled with people sweating and grunting as Burgess Meredith yells at me, "You had the talent to become a good fighter, but instead of that, you become a leg breaker to some cheap second-rate loan shark." It wasn't like that, and I've yet to hear anybody get yelled at. I'm actually surprised by how little swearing I hear there. The staff members seem pretty chill, and I've seen patients come in who are young, old, men, women, all sorts really. I've only a couple of visits left, and I think I'm actually going to miss the place. Since this video could use a little more levity, I'll tell you about the couch incident. Early on, when I was still wearing a splint, I often had trouble getting comfortable enough to sleep. Well, one night, after tossing and turning for a couple of hours, I decided to abandon the bed and stomped to the living room. The futon was already set up as a bed because we'd had a sleepover guest the previous night. That guest was barely 100 pounds. I am more than that. And as I rolled over in search of a sweet spot, the bed tilted alarmingly, and I slid down to where the edge of the mattress met the bottom of the wall. As I lay there, stuck and confused as heck, wondering what happened, it dawned on me that the support brace hadn't been extended. Now, you'd think that if there was ever a time to cry, being trapped in a crevasse would be it. But I was laughing instead, because it was damned funny. Don't worry, I was able to brace my good arm against the wall and adjust my weight, allowing the mattress to rise back into position. But, man, that was quite the night. Those are polychromos colored pencils. In hindsight, the piece didn't need the pencil work. Just like in hindsight, I shouldn't have chased after that rolling watermelon 4 months ago. Wait, I didn't explain that in this video. It's how I broke my arm in the first place, but that's not important. I've already talked about that in a previous video, and I don't want to rehash it. Because, woe is me! Speaking of previous videos, I'd complained about the lyrics of Last Christmas, saying it's poor wordcraft, particularly the phrase, "Last Christmas I gave you my heart, the very next day you gave it away." See, to me, that doesn't make sense. Firstly, you can't re-gift someone's regard. Secondly, although repetition can be a legit way to emphasize an idea, doubling up on the word gave here just sounds stupid. Why not "you threw it away"? Doesn't that sound 10 times better? Well, the other night, producer Mike had a thought. What if he was referring to one of those decorative gingerbread hearts you see all over the German Christmas markets? And you know what? I'm good with that take. So from now on, I'll hear it as, "Last Christmas, I gave you my Lebkuchenherz." Which brings me back to the topic of European Christmas markets. I used to daydream about taking one of those Christmas river cruises where they stop at 7 cities and you can hit a market in each one. But I don't have the energy for all of that. Remember, laggardly. So now my approach would be to headquarter in a major city, say Stuttgart, and day trip to other cities. For example, Mannheim and Heidelberg are each less than an hour away via train. Do you add logistical details to your daydreams? When it came time for highlights, I didn't want a severe contrast. So instead of applying some opaque white gouache with a small round brush, I just used Derwent's white drawing pencil, sort of randomly, and the result was almost a bokeh effect. I'm not talking about baby's breath and carnations, but rather the selective, out-of-focus appearance you get in some photography. The reason I'm explaining this is because the term bokeh was unfamiliar to me, and a kind viewer provided enlightenment. So I'm passing it on. It's strange because I now recall that bokeh was one of the filters available in Corel Photo Paint back in the 1990s when I played around with image editing. I'm happy to share this art piece. I guess I can't call it a watercolor painting since I also used ink and colored pencils. Or am I worrying too much about the rules? Until next time, remember to extend the support brace on your futon before rolling around on it. And stay artsy, my friends.